The problems with kids and their cell phones, it's getting a massive spotlight right now because of this growing trend and the reactions to it. Because while cell phones in school, they've been a problem since Zach Morris was whipping out a brick at Bayside High. Where things are now, it's very different. States all over the country are taking action. Most recently, you had the governor of Virginia this week issuing an executive order to limit phone use at public schools in the state. And that order will have the education department come up with a more specific plan on how to do so. And it could also include bans of smartwatches and tablets, with Virginia even devoting $500,000 to the effort. But this issue, it actually started getting a ton of attention back in June when the Los Angeles Unified School District approved a cell phone ban, with the district announcing in a press release that this is the largest district in the nation to greenlight such a ban, and adding, "Studies have shown that smartphones and social media are distracting kids from learning, eroding their mental health, and stifling in-person social connection." And many who approved this ban noting that phone use goes far above kids just not paying attention, with one board member saying, "When I visit campuses during lunchtime, my heart breaks to see students sitting alone, isolated on their phones instead of engaging and learning with their peers." And in fact, we're seeing things like California Governor Gavin Newsom supporting cell phone bans in schools in the state and telling Politico that he plans on working with the legislature to restrict their use. And of course, that's notable because California policy isn't just California policy, it can be influential nationwide. And actually on the state level, the Assembly already introduced a bill back in February requiring districts to create phone policies, which Newsom does support. Though also, notably, Florida was actually the first state to ban phones in schools. But there it varies from school to school how it's enforced, right? Some banned them by saying phones just have to be in backpacks, which is also why a lot of eyes are on LA, because these policies can be more focused at the district level. In LA, it's a major district with people wondering what kind of tech this ban's going to expand to. Or will the students have to lock their phones away? Will the school just block access to social media? What are the logistics? Though even though LA would be the biggest district to make this move, there are plenty of other schools that they can turn to for examples. Right? Different schools have taken different approaches to phone bans. Some have their students put their phones in storage cubbies during class, though perhaps the biggest new trend is phone locking bags. With in fact, NBC News reporting that in 2023, schools in 41 states had invested in these bags, which you may be familiar with if you've gone to concerts or comedy shows in the past few years. Most are made by a company called Yondr, and you put your phone in the pouch, you lock it, you carry it around with you during the day, and then at the end, you take the bag to a magnetic unlocking base and you're free to scroll again. And their popularity in classrooms is become an increasingly hot topic, especially because you have teachers saying after COVID, phones become bigger problems in schools, saying it's no longer like kids just texting under their desks. In fact, you had one principal turned superintendent in Massachusetts telling the Washington Post that students are just full-ass watching YouTube videos in class. They're refusing to put their phones away, which is why in 2021, she decided to bring these lock pouches in, and not long after, neighboring districts did the same. And reportedly, many who have tried this have found it very effective. With, for example, the vice principal at a middle school in Manchester, Connecticut, telling the Post that social media was increasing conflict among students. But after the students began using lock bags, those conflicts died down, and things like bathroom vaping sessions, they stopped because kids couldn't coordinate. And even though the kids protested at first, a lot have gotten over it. With one even telling the Post that it's nice that she can focus in class. Sometimes she even forgets her phone's on her. And you had an 8th grader saying that the halls and the cafeteria, they're louder now because people are actually talking to each other in person. Some students saying they've actually now made more friends. And that middle school, right, they're not an outlier. You had the Akron Education Association in Ohio telling Vox that after getting lock bags, fights decrease. Also a Colorado principal telling Time magazine that students are less worried about what their peers are saying about them online behind their backs. And this is a phenomenon that we're seeing in other parts of the world as well. A study from Norway found that in middle schools with general phone bans, girls had fewer specialist care visits for mental health issues. Also noticing that bullying went down for both boys and girls. But with all that said, there are still people that are very skeptical about hyper strict bans. With the conversation, for example, saying there just aren't enough studies and hard evidence to actually prove the benefits. Right? A lot of what we've talked about, it seems anecdotal. And you have them adding that students need to learn how to use phones responsibly, not be fully detached from them. And notably regarding LA, the LA Times spoke to a board member who's not sold on the bans, with them arguing that instead the schools need to respect a student's ownership of something important to them. And this, as the Times also pointed to, the burden of enforcing these bans. And then even when it comes to the Yondr lock bags, students at some schools have just found ways around them or broken into them. And others noting that there are dozens of anti-Yondr petitions on change.org, some calling them a waste of money, arguing that it should be up to the teachers on how phones are used in the classroom. But then also, of course, you have people worried about safety. Our parents want to be able to contact their children in the event of an emergency, whether your normal universal emergencies or the ones that we almost specifically only see in America. We have school officials in charge of these policies saying they have answers for most of these questions. With Raymond Dolphin, for example, the assistant principal at the Connecticut middle school, saying that if a shooting did happen, students need to focus on hiding and staying quiet, explaining the whole idea that you want every kid to be taking out a phone and calling parents is the exact opposite of the safety protocol. protocols, and telling the Post that for other general emergencies, teachers can call 911 on their phones, and most classrooms have a landline regardless. And on top of that, if shit really hit the fan, you could cut the bag open if you had to. And then when it comes to family emergencies, right, parents can contact the school's office to get in touch with the students, and there are also often medical exemptions for students who might have their phones for their health reasons. And this is, you have teachers saying, we know that some kids have found a way around the pouch, but saying even still, if enough kids have their phones locked, students feel less incentivized to use them. And then as far as the argument of needing to treat kids like adults, you had Washington Post columnist Kate Cohen writing, how can we possibly prepare students to battle technology that is designed to be addictive? Adults can't resist them either. One principal compares it with giving a kid a cigarette and saying, here, be responsible, which is also, a funny aspect of this debate, because in it, no one is arguing that phones are not a problem, both generally and with young people and with schools. One study found that students receive 237 phone notifications a day, and many while in class. And back in June, we talked about this. The US Surgeon General urged for social media platforms to have warnings about the harms they could pose to youth mental health, right? Something akin to what you see on tobacco and alcohol. But now with all that said and painted for you, I gotta pass the question off to you. What are your thoughts here? Are you for the bans? Are you against them? If you're for the bans, what does that look like? I don't know, I'm really interested.